The Space God Memoirs. Season 3, Episode 3. Bakibra stepped from the spacecraft, her boots touching upon solid ground for the first time since her rebirth. Her eyes scanned over the Ganadrian plains, the pale grasses drifting in the winds, the dust blowing to and fro. A pang of familiarity sprung up in her emotions. This had once been home. Beyond the lip of those far hills stood Ganadria City, its rusty walls host to the mightiest warriors on Aruvis. For years she had ridden across these plains on the back of her Hulzar, accompanied by her faithful knights in arms. She had fought and killed and ultimately died for that city, for its people and its king. Now, as she stepped fully onto the silty earth of Ganadria, Bakibra let Mandia's rays once again caress her cheeks, feeling the warmth of its orange light that for a lifetime had brought her comfort. But no, she told herself, this place is no longer home. She was not returning to live here, nor to serve King Rutus or his degenerate family. She was returning as a liberator. Bakibra sent a mental command to the ship behind her. A platoon of Nentael emerged 2 by 2 from the cube-shaped transport, their silver bodies glistening in the sunlight, their feline-shaped faces displaying no emotions as they marched silently at her back. Bakibra could sense the connection to their minds. Disciplined, ordered. Though their forms were humanoid, she was still unsure whether they were mere automatons or held some spark of spirit within their metal armor. Whatever their nature, they would obey her like the most loyal of soldiers had. Her own armor felt light as evening wear upon her skin. She strode forward. Her suit, too, gleamed in the sunlight, the purest gold luster, inlaid in Nayar sigils, the pauldrons molded in the design of curled wings, a feather pattern upon her back. Bakibra moved through the plains, unburdened, strong, her new body coursing with energy and vitality. It truly felt a miracle to be alive and embodied once more. She took in a deep breath, inhaling the aromas of her homeworld. The smoky scent of the Vilanu grasses, the sweet perfume of the purple Lundar flowers, the dry warmth of the air as it flowed through her newly made, higher-capacity lungs. Yes, this was life. A life so long denied to her by that old armor, now abandoned to the north, decaying with the corpse of her former body. Her limbs surged with strength as she dashed across the plains, faster than any riding beast on Aruvis. Her vision shone with colors never seen by her old eyes, viewing farther and closer than they ever had. And her thoughts were clear, crisp, certain. Her musings went briefly to Keph, to that wanderer who had stumbled through the trials of ascension and brought her along. Bakibra felt gratitude to him, for certain. She respected his tenacity, the plucky determination that had gotten him, and her, to this place. He was a good person, beneath his roguish exterior and silly mannerisms. But ultimately, she was happy to be on her own, in her own body, as her own person. This was her place, her life, her destiny. If the trials had been fairly administered by the Nayar, not tainted by Vaer trickery, Bakibra knew that she would have been the victor. She embodied their virtues, the courage to conquer her foes, the reason needed to solve the traps of the tower, the compassion to give her own life for her comrades, for the one true love who had always eluded her, No. She cut off that thought with a thrust of her will, using the Nayar meditations to dissolve it. That was in the past. That was dead, along with all her companions. The present was here, in this liberation effort. As the hills rolled by and the wind whistled through the valleys, She soon began seeing the signs of the invaders. The land warped and discolored, broken by fleshy turrets covered in throbbing appendages. The land was tainted by this Vaer filth, their monstrous structures like a cancer on Aruvis. Cancer that would be extracted. These supposed gods, who had so long ruled her world, who had stood leering over it from their star fortress. They had commanded their cults, their loyal followers bringing chaos and oppression, shutting down the progress of technology, keeping the world in a state of barbarism, and its people fighting like animals over the scraps of a dead civilization. Bakibra banished the anger into her meditations, visualizing the geometric form of compassion, and letting her rage melt into it. The Vaer were beaten, after all. Their eye of the gods was transformed. Its black, urchin-like exterior, altered by Nyar technology, into a radiant silver star. Their fleets were scattered across space, banished from Aruvis by her new people. This was one of the few remnants, the stubborn ground forces who had yet to be driven off. They were no gods. And soon, the Vaer would be eliminated like vermin. They were approaching. She saw them emerging from their fleshy turrets. Dozens of those red-clad warriors, the Phizar, slime mold cultures programmed as soldiers and poured into armored shells. Raising a hand, Bakibra directed her own warriors forward. The silver Nentael rushed ahead, and in moments they were upon the red Phizar, the opposing forces clashing. Plasma and electricity jolted through the air as their weapons discharged. Blades collided. Bodies fell. Bakibra let the energy spin around her. The Atra, the essence of reality, capable of altering the universe by the will of its holder. It surged within, spiraling in a rush from her heart and down her right arm. She moved it with her will, directing the Atra into her hand in a precise pattern, empowering it, solidifying it. There appeared a long blade of light, a glow like molten metal, but with a golden luster to match her armor. It was pleasantly warm in her hand, but for her foes, the blade would burn hot indeed. Bakibra marched forward, quickening her stride as she raised the light blade above her head and darted at the nearest enemy. Thrusting it spear-like, she embedded it within the Phizar's chest, where it sank in smoothly. With another motion, she pulled it loose. The bio-warrior fell to the ground, its insides boiling. Several more were getting close, but Bakibra spun her blade over her head and channeled more Atra into it. A beam of searing light shot forth, striking two warriors. A third got within range, but her reflexes outmatched theirs, and Bakibra cut the Phizar down with little effort. Such soulless creations were no match for an awakened Nyar. She strode ahead, hacking or blasting at foes as they got close, but letting her silver-clad minions occupy the majority of them. As the enemy forces continued to pour from their turrets, Bakibra split her attention between fighting and issuing mental commands to her squadron, directing them as she would toy figures on a map. They followed without hesitation, seeming to respond to her orders as if they were their own thoughts. She directed a group of Nentael to intercept the Phizar spilling out of a turret on her right. As the groups met, Bakibra headed for the left, up the curve of a nearby hillock. From here she could see Ganadria's city, or rather, she beheld its desecration. Ganadria had once been known as the Iron City, built around the fallen remains of a towering colossus, the king's palace within its hollowed metal skull. But now, the whole thing was enveloped in a viscous membrane, a grotesque Vaer bioconstruct that stretched tent-like over the whole city, all slick and gooey like the hive of some putrid insect. She felt nauseous just looking at it, the monstrosity casting an immense shadow over the plains. Bakibra stopped at the top of the hill. She could sense her Nentael just behind, catching up to her after winning their battles against the Phizar. Soon they appeared, the cat-faced sentinels joining her atop the overlook. Bakibra ordered them to stop. There was no point to rushing ahead, not while the Vaer's defenses were still in place. Instead, she sent a command upward, to the Nyar coasting just above the clouds. "We are in position. Eliminate the barrier." 5 octahedron craft popped into view, darting in through the cloud cover, each a silvery hue. They were joined by a yellow cone of similar size, spinning rapidly as it moved like a top. Damanya. Bakibra sent a greeting to the pilot of the cone, a Naiar she had known from her time as Keph's passenger, and who had been instrumental in training her in the days since her revival. The 6 Naiar fighter craft descended towards the engulfed city, zipping about like fireflies as they began to dodge laser fire from mouth-like cannons lining its sides. But before the Naiar could truly begin their assault, the Vaer-infested city opened up its orifice and let loose a swarm of Vigle. More Vaer creations, zooming through the skies, their ruddy brown shells like some sort of winged crabs, somewhat larger than a person, the faces of people set into their undersides. Most of the Vigle remained above, pursuing Damanya and her compatriots. 7 landed, wings folding into their oversized shells, as the crustacean biomonsters stood up and got ready to face Bakibra. She readied her forces for another fight, swiftly broadcasting stratagem to each of her Nentail teams as the crab-like humanoids skittered forward. Then another battle began, the bulky crustaceans hurling their huge clawed hands at the Naiar forces, each Vigle taking on multiple Nentail, which was Bakibra's plan. She split her forces between the 7 Vigle, directing them to flank the monsters. One of the Vigle went for her, charging like a bulldugga enraged. Her enhanced reflexes allowed her to easily sidestep, but a second later the beast opened up its mouth and let loose a spray of caustic yellow goo. Acid. Bakibra raised her left hand and pushed the Atra through it. Immediately a shimmering barrier appeared around her, a force field coalescing into place, absorbing the acidic spittle. A trick from her old life, once achieved through technology and now enhanced by her new abilities. As a Vigle heaved out the last of its goo, she let her shield down and lunged forward, her searing blade cleaving through its shelled armor and its innards. A quick scan of the battlefield informed Bakibra that her forces were doing well enough, the flanking tactic limiting the effectiveness of the Vigle's acid breath. 4 of the enemy were already downed, and while her own forces had shrunk considerably, she was certain that victory would be hers. Bakibra set her gaze upward. There, Damanya's cone, along with 3 of the Octa, positioned themselves at the 4 corners of Ganadria. As they hovered there, hundreds of feet above the cocooned city, Bakibra could hear a harmonic tone from each ship. Damanya let loose 2 blue beams from her vessel, each one shooting towards a different one of the Octas. As it struck those 2 ships, they in turn mirrored and reflected it to the final one. The beam intensified as the tone raised pitch, until at last a radiant blue blast struck the viscous dome. The light spread out across the length of it, and then began to seep into the structure. Within the course of seconds, the blue energy had faded. Bubbles formed upon the gross sack, grew larger and then popped, letting out a sparkly glimmer. The biostructure shook, then began to collapse, its putrescence sloughing off the shell of the city and splattering across the ground. An immense slaughterhouse stench wafted through the air. The keeper felt herself about to retch, but looked on with a smile. The Vaer construct removed, Ganadria's rusty head once more stood proud upon the plains, grimy but intact. A quick reading from her sensors told her that people yet remained within its walls, her people. Bakibra's gaze was drawn towards the old city wall, the stone enclosure that again could be seen, encasing the outer boundaries of Ganadria. There stood a solitary figure. He floated from the central gateway. Her heart jumped at the sight of him, a sinking sensation in her gut. That being wore the face of one she had known well. His pale features looked much like they had in life, alabaster skin and a noble beauty, his eyes as cold and as white as his skin. Ophiro, her sworn ward, her prince, the love that had never quite been. His body was cast in black armor, like clustered shards of obsidian, his back sprouting feathered white wings double the span of his height. Ophiro's long hair billowed as he rose in the air, and she could sense a pull towards him. She resisted it, gripping her light sword tight. Within seconds he was at eye level with her, standing 10 feet away. 2 of her Nentael moved to strike at him, but were immediately flung back by some invisible force. hurled across the hills. "You," she said, taking the sword in both hands and narrowing her eyes at him. "Ah, Bakibra," he said, his voice cultured and resonant. "It seems we have both transcended our former selves. I figured you were gone, dissolved into that ridiculous illusion you were enraptured by." "Not so," he answered with a flourish. "A part of me remained, and despite the interference of your Nayar and that clownish gray-skinned pilot, it seems I was worthy of the trials after all. Our lords beyond certainly seem to think so, and now here I am, awakened, among them. They must have low standards indeed to drag you out of the afterlife and into their ranks." She knew this was a Vaer ploy, a last-ditch deception to strike at her weak point. She would have none of it. Without another word, Bakibra stepped forward and swung her blade at Ophiro. A staff appeared in his hands, coalescing out of the shadows, a rod of darkness that intercepted her blade in its course. As her Atra-infused weapons collided, a sonic boom filled the air. She pressed her assault, hacking and slashing at the risen Ophiro, while his shadowy staff spun and swirled, blocking her every strike. She could sense a kind of living tension in the air, magnetic and throbbing. Letting one hand off his weapon, he pushed his palm towards her, and Bakibra lifted in the air. For an instant, she lost all sense of orientation, her body hurtling along. Then she had her back pinned against Ganadri's old stone wall, the ground far below her. Ophiro hovered at eye level once more. Her manifested sword was gone, lost along with her concentration. Below her, the Nayar and Vaer forces continued to clash at the city's entrance. "Come now, Bakibra." Ophiro shook his head and met her gaze. "This is not you. You are not my enemy. We do not belong as foes, but rather on the same side of things. I was your prince, your friend, and in another world we could have been something more." "No, we have already resolved all of this. I faced you down. I told you the truth. I rejected you. How much of that was you, Bakibra? And how much was that scoundrel Keph influencing your mind? In the former days, we were never of equal station. We could not truly love one another as peers. But now that has changed. The both of us stand among the awake, the titles of the past long gone. Join me, and we can remake this world, together." He reached out his hand. In his face she could see the boy who she had watched over all those years, who she had pined over for a decade. She recalled their one tender evening of passion. In his pale gaze she could feel it, a kind of love, but also a power, pushing at her, pulsing across her skin. Even in his ordinary life, Prince Ophiro had been mighty, a scion, above the Ruvens around him. The kingdom had proclaimed him destined for greatness, a chosen of the gods. His power was now magnified. But in the background, Bakibra watched as the last of the Vigle was shot down by Damania and her forces. The Vaer were beaten, driven from this rock, and Ophiro had never loved her, only used her as a means to further his ambitions. He was unworthy of her, brought back to life as a consolation for the Vaer's failed ascension. She brought to mind the geometric proof for reason, and let it send away the rest of her feelings into the void. Then she once more called up her blade, manifesting it in her hand, which she thrust into Ophiro's stomach. He grunted in pain as the radiant sword pierced his body. The look in his eyes might have been one of surprise or regret, perhaps betrayal. It mattered not. She would not cling to him, or her unrequited love, never deserved. Ophiro's eyes rolled back into his head and he fell, his telekinetic flight fading away. He crashed to the ground and lay still. Bakibra fell as well, but landed in a controlled crouch, using the Atra to slow her fall. At the city gates, the Nentael, now joined by a few additional Nayar, were cleaning out the rest of the Vaer forces, Vigle shells and pools of Phizar slime littering the ground. Within minutes, they were marching into the city, Bakibra at their lead. She could already see the beleaguered faces of Ruvens emerging from their homes, likely having witnessed enormous atrocities. As the people looked upon her, many a head bowed in respect. Some even got to their knees, supplicating themselves before their new saviors. Some cheered, others mouthed prayers to their newly arrived gods, their liberators. She peeked behind, hearing the sudden flapping of wings. Ophiro, yet alive, hovered near 20 feet in the air. Their eyes met for a brief instant. She felt a curious tingle pass between them. Regret, sorrow, or something deeper. But before the feeling could fully define itself, Ophiro zipped away, vanishing into one of the retreating Vaer craft. Perhaps they would meet again, but for now, he was irrelevant. She turned back to the city, to the people. Would she be a goddess to them? Bakibra was not certain whether the Naiar would proclaim themselves deities like the Vaer had, or give the world into the hands of its people, guiding them from afar. But either way, she was certain that a new age had dawned upon Ganadria, and all of Aruvis. Thoughts of Bakibra and the strange point-of-view vision still ran through my mind as I rode the high-speed elevator to Kucingkecil's surface. The whole experience had been so crisp and clear, like I had been her, seen through her eyes, inhabited her body. The elevator was a silvery tube without buttons and controls, operating mentally, like the rest of the Naiar tech. Little notices blipped subtly in my mind as it moved through the various levels of the planetoid station, taking me through the world's crust up to the surface. It was an odd place for a work meeting, but Tabalnak had insisted on it. I tried to shake off the Bakibra stuff, but it wasn't easy. The Naiar weren't supposed to dream. Unconscious dreams, per the records, were just a primitive way of connecting that happened on farm worlds. Us awake people just connected to the universal mind that was the monad, and we did so intentionally. I wondered if that vision had been an artifact of me and Bakibra's prior connection, the fact that she had spent months living as a spiritual passenger in my own mind. The elevator opened with a waft of cool air onto a hatched metal platform above the planetoid's rocky surface. Up above, the unobstructed sky was black and studded with stars. I tossed the Bakibra stuff to the side of my mind. There'd be time to contemplate it all later. I stepped out, walking across the platform and towards a receiver tower about 100 meters away. That was the meeting site. Moments later, I stood at the base, where a ladder led up the steely side of the tower, whose top occasionally shimmered with color as it took in the Atra. At ground level, in the shadows of an overhang, stood Tabalnak, alone. "Quite the meeting place, eh?" I said, waving at him. Tabalnak's 3 eyes scanned over me, as if making sure I was actually me. Satisfied, he let out a breath and looked directly in my face. "Initiate Keph. Greetings," he said with a nod. "And yes, privacy is paramount. The surface is far less monitored than the interior, thus this choice of locale." Guess we need to keep all this private. You find out anything more about Andarash or whoever made that hologram? "Yes. There was no such Naiar as Andarash. He never existed. There is no real record of him in the piloting program. The hologram itself was made here in Kucingkecil, encoded with espionage-level security to keep it from being detected easily. The only data on Andarash was that in our local files, created recently. Scrag and sneaky. So much effort just to try to get me discorporated and relay that weird message." The platform below us shook slightly. There was a low rumbling, followed by a spinning metallic creak. I paused a moment, listening, as did my companion. But it was only the sound of the planetoid facility below, operating one of its many systems. Tabalnak spoke up again. "Mostly I feel it was a distraction. At the same time you were chasing down that false suspect, there was a spike in activity from within our local Bardo realm. A series of malignant programs were inserted into the planetoid's monitoring systems. Has it been handled? Not entirely. This was a complex series of interlocked programs, latching itself onto our networks. They can't simply be removed without causing unknown damage. Our technicians deduced they were initially installed weeks ago, and have been unfolding themselves according to a predetermined schedule." Weeks ago, so before that explosion. It is very possible that the processing center explosion was also a diversion, designed to draw our attention away from the real plan. Which is... That brings us right back to your mysterious message. The Shattered Master will be vindicated. His quest will be completed. Yeah, I'm guessing the purpose of that whole dumb encounter was that message. I'm not sure it was meant to go to me or someone else. Got no idea who this Shattered Master even is, or what the rest of it was about. Kucingkecil, he said with a heavy breath. An ancient leader among the Vaer. But only to his followers would he be called the Shattered Master. No, among the Naiar he is called the Annihilator. Sounds menacing. I'm guessing he's not a good guy. A chill ran across my skin, mysterious tingle in the back of my head at the mention. By modern standards, his views were extreme, even among the Vaer. Kucingkecil launched a galaxy-wide war against the Naiar, his goal to destroy our connection to the monad itself. During the centuries-long conflict, many of the Vaer saw their leader's madness and turned against him. Their betrayal ultimately allowed the Naiar to triumph and led to the uneasy Cold War between our factions that persists to this day. Kucingkecil, like all of us, could not simply be slain, nor could such a powerful being be adequately imprisoned. Thus his essence was shattered, the fragments of his consciousness scattered across the galaxy. Following the conflict, the Vaer unity in general dropped the more extreme views of Kucingkecil's followers. Openly, at least. Exactly. It is known that certain Vaer still hold to his creed, believing that the Naiar need to be fully destroyed and the monad disconnected. You think they might be involved here? Yes. And no. Tabalnak shook his trunk and blew out a trumpet-like sound. The attack fits with their motivation, yes, but not their methods. Every attack we've seen so far has been technological, using Naiar technology and Naiar methods. Whoever is involved has access to high knowledge of Atra technology, along with restricted spy-level programs. We need to be careful. We need to be on the lookout and prepared for something big. There will be another incident soon. When? The cyclical meeting is soon upon us. Archon Lumavari will emerge from his slumber and meet with the sector overseers, the fleet commanders, the council voices. Pretty standard stuff, right? Happens every year. Yes, mostly it is formality, designed around planning and agendas. But if our adversaries indeed want to strike out against the Harmonium, it will be the perfect time to do so. I spoke of the malicious programs we found in the Bardo realm. They were unfolding themselves according to a schedule, which it seems is ending in several days' time, in perfect accordance with the meeting. So we probably got some Vaer cultists on our hands, trying to complete the work of an ancient extremist, using Naiar tech to do it. Tabalnak grunted. As good a summary as any, from what little we know. He paused, gazing off into the dark horizon, where several bright lights flashed, followed by a trio of ascending orbs. Ships taking off from one of the planetoid hangars. But I wonder, he continued, turning back to me, why did they share the message with you? Are they bragging? Taunting us? Or maybe there's something else at play. I'm pretty new to this whole galactic politics business, but I'm guessing there's more levels to this than we know. We got millennia of conflict coupled with immortal beings. Lots of potential grudges at play. The trio of lights grew smaller as they ascended, eventually vanishing into the starry skies. Yes, Tabalnak said. This is a puzzle. One we must solve carefully, methodically, but before it overwhelms us. The cyclical meeting is fast approaching, and we must be observant. Watch the computer systems, the holograms, the nanites, the Bardo itself. Until then, keep vigilant. Thank you for listening to this episode of The Space God Memoirs. Space God is written, performed, and produced by A.M. Arctos. Original musical score by Alpha Colors. Various sound effects created by Industrial Strength Records Incorporated. Please support this podcast by following, rating, and sharing on your favorite social media site. For further info on Space God, its creator, and various other opinions, musings, and thoughts, go to www.spacegodmemoirs.com or follow me on Instagram, Twitter, or Facebook. If you enjoyed the Space God Memoirs, please consider supporting us by becoming a patron. Check out the Patreon link in our description to learn more.